Hello friends. I wanted to have a little discussion about BookTok. One of Bookish YouTube's favorite debates is BookTok ruining everything. So recently I went on a deep dive into BookTok, an area of the internet that I mostly have only known by watching YouTube videos about whether BookTok is good or bad. Well, I actually spent some time over there trying to learn all about BookTok marketing. What are the best practices for marketing my books on BookTok? Now, if you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove and I'm a fantasy author, and I've been making my living as a fantasy author since 2009. For much of that time, I was writing to market fantasy and paranormal romance. But just in the last couple of years, I've shifted to writing what I really want to write, which is the fantasy world that I've been developing for 30 years, and it does not really fit a lot of the boxes. Like, just as one example, the three primary races of this world are the Miralem, who are telepathic and a little bit elfy, but they don't live a whole lot longer than humans. The Daramons, who are not telepathic. Both races can use sorcery. Everybody can use sorcery. But they've been the underdogs because they're not telepathic. It's a big disadvantage. And Finarlem, who are basically like doll people, a race of artificial beings created by magic. So none of those are like fae, demons, vampires, wolf shifters, any of the usual fantasy or paranormal creatures. And this is going to be pertinent to this video. So I'm learning all about BookTok marketing. And the basic advice that I got is that the best and easiest way to market a book on TikTok is to do slides. And some people do really short slides. Some people do like long slides with a lot of dialogue from the book. But either way, your first slide is crucial because that's where you're going to have the hook that compels the readers to keep going. So the first slide needs to be a really compelling hook, and it needs to convey like what is this book and like what trope or like type of character are we dealing with here. A lot of information needs to fit on that first slide in like one sentence. So when I first started my TikTok back in the day, and I was only promoting these written to market, more fantasy romance, paranormal romance. My most popular video that I did, there were no slides back then, but similar concept. Most popular video started with the tagline, "When the Fae King orders you to the bedroom." So in this one little sentence, you know, you got Fae, you've got, you know, dominating, Fae King, something sexy is going to happen in the bedroom, he's ordering you. There's a lot of tropey stuff there. It's not really a surprise why that one did well. But I'm going through my new book, and I'm looking through it, and I'm like, I got nothing. This whole book, and I am struggling mightily to find anything that I can use for that first line to catch a reader. I don't think it's because there isn't an audience for the book or that people wouldn't like it. I've heard from some people that read it that they loved it. I don't think it's because people would not enjoy this book, or that it's not like so weird that I think it couldn't have an audience. But I wanted to talk about how I am now seeing in my research of doing this marketing, how TikTok is shaping how we write, or at least what sells. So if you're trying to write what sells, TikTok is going to have an effect on what you write. Probably even if you're not on TikTok, but especially if you have been marketing on TikTok, I can see how this would change what you would even think about writing. I could also see why one of the biggest genres, at least in fantasy, like there's a whole contemporary space, and I have no idea what's going on there because I don't read contemporary anything, but at least in fantasy, I can see why romantasy in particular has really come to the forefront on BookTok, because romantasy is just exactly what you want for BookTok. So let's talk about some of these factors. The first thing is that TikTok's algorithm does not seem to work quite the same as any of the other social media platforms. If you're coming from something like YouTube, TikTok seems really weird. You can release a video and it gets 150 views, and then your next video gets like 10,000 views. Like that can happen on TikTok, and you can have 0 followers the whole time this is going on. And you can make very similar content and post it over and over and over, and different people will see it. And that's just kind of an accepted thing on TikTok. YouTube is so different in that regard. Like my videos have grown slowly along with my follower count, and I would never make super repeated content on YouTube. That would be so weird if I made like the same video next week. That would be the same audience. TikTok though, you can do that. Different audience all the time. The other thing about TikTok is that they censor a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of spicy books on BookTok, very popular. But one thing that I saw people say for advice over and over is that you have to be careful with spicy, and that some of the best hooks are more emotional, more visceral, tugging at your emotions, rejection and anger, and these like big emotions. So as I'm looking over my whole catalog of books, and I've written all sorts of different things, and thinking like, what would actually work best for this TikTok hook? The closer I was writing to more of like an epic fantasy romance where a lot of big emotional stuff happens and it's like a roller coaster, those are the books that I'm immediately thinking are going to be the easiest to market. And it also helps if they have a trope figure in the book, like a fae king or something like that, where I can say in the very first slide, when the fae king rejects you. I mean, I don't know if that's like really the best hook, but basically I have some books that are more like cute and cozy. It's a little harder to find a great hook in a cute and cozy book because the emotions just aren't as big, and they're not meant to be. I have my short, very spicy fairy tales, and they're pretty short, and they lean heavily on the spice, so they don't get into as much of like big epic things happening. And then my current book is just like, it's kind of like a quirky, adventurous rom-com. So there's also not like no one gets rejected in the course of the book. The only scenes where someone is angry have a lot of context. So I'm going through the book with this advice in mind to find these scenes with rejection, anger, frustration, things like that. And they're kind of not in there, because it's not really meant to evoke that level of intensity. It's kind of more of a comfort read. But my book, The Broken Queen, which I did write to be a little more of a romantasy, that one has been one of the easier ones to come up with a good slide, because one of the main characters is the Dragon King. So it checks the box of like, here's the dude. And it also has some of these like big emotional scenes. So if I was just trying to write to market, I would automatically be thinking, okay, I need to work in scenes with big emotions that are like big hooks for the reader. And I need to make sure that I have like a fae king or a dragon king or elf king, something you know what it is. Can't make up any fantasy races or make anything complicated. Now, this is not to say that people don't successfully sell other types of books. Like there's plenty of cozy fantasy romance on TikTok for sure. Like you can sell different types of things. Just the most obvious and easy thing is something like a fantasy romance that has big emotions, big kind of romancy archetypes, and just all this like intense stuff going on. When I would look at successful TikTok accounts while I was doing my research, and I'd see the author describing their book, it was often those crazy things happening. It would always seem to be something like when you're trapped in the room with 2 wolf shifters and they both hate you, and in 2 minutes you're going to have to battle each other for your lives in the prison games. I don't know. I'm kind of riffing on this, but like the stuff that would be happening would be like so over the top, but it would present a scenario where, you kind of don't want to know what's going to happen. So this TikTok algorithm is going to be making you think, I need big events happening. As I was doing this research, I was looking through The Broken Queen, a book I've already written, and thinking like, if only I could revise some of these scenes to make them more TikTok friendly. And then I hated that I had that thought because I already wrote the book and I was very happy with it. And taking out scenes in isolation and reworking them just to work on TikTok viscerally feels unpleasant. I don't think that it would make the book better. I think it would just make it more marketable on TikTok. So you got the first slide, and then you've got the rest of the slides. Or you might also see people put up like a box with like a chunk of text. Some of it's highlighted. Those are like the two pretty common types of things. So you'll have a block of text and you don't have that much space. So you're gonna want to convey your ideas quickly and intensely as far as what is happening here and why someone should read on. So as I was trying to make these slides, I would find myself trimming out a lot of like extraneous language descriptions, like you're just trying to get to the meat of the scene, and that's fine. You can trim things back, but the more like kind of verbose your prose is, the harder it is to fix it for TikTok without like just changing it completely. Like if your characters speak in very long sentences, like ever, that's bad for TikTok because it's hard to do a slide where somebody says like 25 words at once, or you can break it up, but sometimes the breaking point just isn't the best. So naturally, you kind of start thinking, it's better if the language is a little on the simpler side and the emotions are conveyed very simply but intensely, and the scene needs like a cliffhanger. So you need to make sure that at some point in your book, or many points, because you're going to want to have different slides of different scenes to rotate among, you want moments that are going to be like, oh my God, so crazy, what's going to happen next? So what all this boils down to, however, is that what makes a TikTok slide or excerpt for TikTok really good is not necessarily the same as what makes a book really good. It's not just my books. There are a lot of books that are very good. There are books on my own shelves that I love, but I think they'd be very hard to make TikToks of, just due to the nature of how the story flows. Like the context that surrounds a scene can really get in the way. Like if you have an intense scene, but there's a lot of like context that happened earlier in the book that is part of what makes the scene powerful, but you would need to explain that for the scene to make sense. Well, that's no good because you don't have time to explain that. You got to think about these things if you want a good TikTok moment. You don't want too much context. You don't want to make up any kind of like fantasy races or any kind of magic that's hard to explain. You want everything to fit in bite-sized little templates for enough hooks to promote yourself on TikTok. Otherwise, it is very, very difficult to find the hooks. And then you're going to want your language to be pretty simple, your emotions to be intense. And I do think this is affecting what sells, and it's also affecting how people write. Even down to things like how first person is becoming more common as opposed to third person. First person lends itself to more very punchy, immediate emotions compared to third person. But third person can be wonderful for like fantasy novels that are very immersive, give you like this really broad sense of the world, descriptions and like bits of background information that flesh it out. Just imagine Lord of the Rings being a first person novel. It would not be the same experience whatsoever. I personally prefer third person by a smidge over first person, but it's becoming much more common to write books in first person. And if you are an author that's writing to market, trying to make a living, this is definitely going to affect the choices that you make all along the way. How you write, what you write about, how you structure the scenes. If I was going to get deep into this write to market BookTok world, I would rethink everything I was doing, and I would really try to focus on those punchy, intense scenes. Simple context and tropes that people can easily grasp. But I'll admit, as a reader, I find this depressing. I think it is part of the reason why a lot of books are starting to feel the same. And if you are the kind of reader that wants something a little quirky, you're like, okay, I don't want to follow that part of BookTok, or I'm going to find my book somewhere else. And when I got on BookTok, the other thing I tried to do is I tried to curate my feed so that it was mostly people who don't read the most popular books. Who is reading those quirky books that are more going to match my taste, that don't really fit those common norms. But it's hard. It is hard to curate your feed that way because the algorithm is going to always favor what's popular, and what's popular is that. So you're going to be in this constant fighting against the current, trying to create a feed that does not have very much of that. Now, the good news, the good side of BookTok, even if you're someone like me, where you usually don't like the most popular book, you're looking for those books that are a little more of a hidden gem or something a little offbeat. I like plenty of books that were fairly popular, but I rarely like the most popular ones. The thing that I do bear in mind about BookTok is Barnes & Noble is actually planning to open a bunch new stores this year, which is crazy because as long as I have been alive, pretty much, at least as long as I've been an adult, I've been hearing about how bookstores are in peril. I was a big Borders girl. Borders went under. A lot of independent bookstores that I used to go to have gone under. And for a little while, Barnes & Noble was in some serious trouble. And I go to Barnes & Noble all the time. I would love to have a great indie. We do have a great indie bookstore in Asheville, but we are night people and they close kind of early. And so we usually go to Barnes & Noble. I would be so sad if Barnes & Noble went under. It's kind of like one of the only places we can go in the evening and like wander around, pick out a book, smell that aroma of books and coffee mingling. And when I am actually in the store browsing the shelves, I usually do find one of those quirkier books on the shelf when I can actually get out there, look at all the backs and really check out everything. That's where I often find some real gems. Of course, also support your indie authors too, but there's a real possibility that without BookTok, Barnes & Nobles would be closing. Because for some years, bookstores have been kind of running on this cycle of they are sustained by like one bestseller at a time. Everything rests on the Harry Potter, the Twilight, the Aragon, we've had a number of them that had like the Midnight Party. Now we've got Sarah J. Maas books and Fourth Wing and so on. But there are actually a lot of books that are like very popular, and owning physical books has become more popular again. And a lot of that is thanks to BookTok. So even though part of me is definitely very salty about the way that the TikTok algorithm and the TikTok marketing strategy feels particularly like it's going to smooth a lot of writing into this same style and same lane. The bright side of it all is that we might get to keep bookstores simply because of BookTok. And because that bookstore is there, we still have the opportunity to go browse and find other stuff. Also, I know that in the publishing industry, it's not just the bookstores, but often that quirky author that you like that's a little under the radar, but they keep publishing, that author's whole career is probably funded in part by whatever big BookTok-y book that the publisher is putting out. On the broad scheme of things, I still say that anything that keeps books cool and trendy and like something people are spending their money on and talking about endlessly, and keeping bookstores in business, keeping bookstores like a cool place to go, that is still 100% a positive for all readers, because the fact remains, I don't have to get on BookTok. I can totally ignore BookTok. Just go to Barnes & Noble, gloss right over whatever's on the big popular table out front, just dig around until I find something kind of weird. And I also just want to add, if you do enjoy those types of books, I am not here to shame you about it. I'm glad you're reading books, and we all have different tastes. I meet people all the time who are like, ew, manga. And I love manga. As you can see, I have a ton of manga. That's like, I don't want to call it a guilty pleasure because I don't feel guilty about it at all. But to me, that's what hits my sweet spots usually is manga. So I'm not shaming anybody for liking their first person romantasy with a lot of over-the-top emotions. whatever it is in life that is giving you joy right now, great. That's fantastic. And thank you for keeping Barnes & Noble in business. But nevertheless, I wanted to explain from a writing perspective how spending a month diving deep into BookTok gave me kind of an understanding of the behind the scenes of how this particular algorithm is steering writing in a certain direction, especially in certain genres. Now, every time I make a video about this stuff, I know you guys have all kinds of opinions about it, so I don't even think I have to prompt you to leave comments. You're gonna do it anyway, but go ahead. Air your grievances about BookTok, defend BookTok to the death, whatever it is that you need to do, but please just be cordial to each other. If you like more from me, I have a Patreon and a Substack, free content on both, same content on both, or the paid tier gets you access to 2 bonus videos a month, voted on by you guys. And if you want to read any of my not very tropey books, go to the link in my description and particularly click on my Hidden Lands series. If you want to read any of my tropey books, click on anything else. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!